Picture this. It's the morning of November 11th, 1940. You're a duck hunter in Minnesota. The sun is shining. The temperature is climbing towards 60 degrees. You're wearing a light jacket, maybe just a flannel shirt. Your sleeves are rolled up. You left your heavy coat in the truck because why would you need it? It's practically summer out here. The Mississippi River stretches before you, calm and inviting. Ducks are everywhere, more than you've ever seen. Thousands of them, filling the sky, landing in the water all around your boat. Your shotgun is warm from firing. This is the hunt of a lifetime. By nightfall, you'll be fighting for your life. And dozens of men just like you won't survive to see the sunrise. This is the story of the Armistice Day blizzard of 1940. The storm that came out of nowhere. The day the duck hunters died. And the disaster that changed American weather forecasting forever. If your father or grandfather hunted ducks in the Midwest, ask them about this storm. They'll know. Everyone who lived through it remembers. And the stories they tell will send chills down your chills. It started 4 days earlier, 3,000 miles away. On November 7th, 1940, a storm system was battering the Pacific Northwest. Winds howled at 40 miles per hour across Washington state. And in Tacoma, something incredible was happening. The newly opened Tacoma Narrows Bridge, a marvel of modern engineering, began to sway. Not a little, a lot. Workers had nicknamed it Galloping Gertie because of how it moved in the wind. But on this morning, it was not galloping. It was thrashing, twisting, bucking like a wild animal. And then, at 11:10 in the morning, the entire center span tore itself apart and crashed into Puget Sound. It was one of the longest suspension bridges in the world, destroyed in minutes. The collapse was captured on film and became one of the most famous engineering disasters in history. But here's what most people don't know. The storm that brought down that bridge didn't die over the Pacific. It crossed the Rocky Mountains, and it gathered strength. And 4 days later, it unleashed hell on the American heartland. November 11th was Armistice Day, a national holiday, the day America remembered the end of World War I. Schools were closed. Offices were empty. Families planned to attend parades and ceremonies honoring the veterans. But for duck hunters across the upper Midwest, it was something else entirely. It was opportunity. You see, the fall of 1940 had been unusually warm. October came and went without a freeze. Duck hunting had been slow all season. The birds had not moved south yet because they had no reason to. The weather was too nice. Then, on the night of November 10th, word spread among the hunting community. A cold front was coming. Finally, the ducks would fly. And with Armistice Day being a holiday, thousands of men could get out on the water. They had no idea what was actually heading their way. That morning, November 11th, hunters from Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois loaded up their wooden skiffs and cranky outboard motors. They packed light. It was 55 degrees at sunrise. By 10 o'clock, it was pushing 60. Some men stripped down to their undershirts. And the ducks. My God, the ducks. Survivors would later describe it as biblical. Clouds of waterfowl, tens of thousands of birds, darkening the sky. Mallards, canvasbacks, teals, flying low and fast. The hunting was better than anything these men had ever experienced. The ducks knew something the hunters did not. They were running from the storm. Around noon, the sky began to change. A light rain started falling. Then the wind picked up. At first, nobody thought much of it. A little weather just made the hunting better. But then the rain turned to sleet. The sleet turned to snow. And the temperature began to fall. Not gradually, not slowly. It crashed. In the span of 2 hours, temperatures dropped 30 degrees. then 40, then 50. What had been a mild autumn morning became a screaming Arctic nightmare. Winds that had been gentle breezes became 50, 60, 70 miles per hour, gales. And those thousands of duck hunters, scattered across the Mississippi River and its backwaters, suddenly found themselves trapped in the worst blizzard any of them had ever seen. Ed Kosadowski was hunting near Winona, Minnesota. He was 20 years old. When the storm hit, he and his partners could barely see their hands in front of their faces. Visibility dropped to 30 feet, then 20, then nothing but white. He remembered decades later that the ducks were everywhere, so they just stood there and shot them. Then it hit. Oh, it was a terrible night. For thousands of hunters, that night became a battle for survival. Their boats were small wooden skiffs, built for calm water. When waves started crashing at 5 feet, 6 feet, some of those boats simply came apart. Men drowned within sight of shore, unable to swim against currents that dragged them under. Others made it to islands in the river, only to find themselves stranded with no shelter, no dry clothing, and temperatures plunging towards 0 degrees. The wind chill was brutal. The cold seared men's lungs when they tried to breathe. Survivors described the air as feeling thick like syrup and burning like a red-hot blade. Some hunters turned their boats upside down and huddled beneath them. Others piled into hay bales they found on farmland. A few managed to build small fires using the gunpowder from their shells. But the wind kept blowing those fires out. And one by one, through the long frozen night, men began to die. Gerald Terrace was 17 years old. He had gone hunting that morning with his father, his brother, and a family friend. They also brought 2 big black Labrador retrievers. When the storm hit, their boat could not make it back to shore. They became stranded on a small island in the Mississippi. As night fell and temperatures dropped to 10 degrees below 0, Gerald's father, brother, and friend all succumbed to the cold. Gerald survived for one reason. The 2 Labradors curled up against him through the night, their body heat keeping him alive until rescue crews found him the next morning. He was huddled against a tree stump, barely conscious, with frozen limbs and a broken heart. He had watched his family die. Norman Roloff was 19, hunting with his best friend Sonny Ehlers near Wabasha. They were out on the water when the storm descended. He remembered 70 years later that it had been so warm he had taken his hunting jacket off. He did not need it. Then the rain came, and the wind picked up, and they had fabulous shooting. The ducks just kept coming. Then it hit. Roloff and Ehlers spent the night fighting for their lives, watching men around them freeze to death. They survived. For the rest of their lives, they got together every November 11th to raise a glass and toast their good fortune. They were not dead. There are not that many of them left, Roloff said in 2010, but it was something you remember a long time. As hunters died on the river, the storm was wreaking havoc everywhere. In Minneapolis, motorists abandoned their cars as snow piled up over the rooftops. By morning, entire streets had vanished beneath 15-foot and 20-foot drifts. People who had left for work in shirt sleeves found themselves trapped, stranded, and freezing in vehicles that could not move. In Watkins, Minnesota, a passenger train and a freight train collided in the blinding snow. The tracks had become invisible. 2 people died in the wreck. Townspeople formed a human chain to lead the surviving passengers to safety through the whiteout. On Lake Michigan, the storm found other victims. 3 massive steel freighters were caught on the open water. The SS Anna C. Minch, the SS Novadoc, and the SS William B. Davik were all carrying cargo to ports that would never receive them. The Davik went down with all 32 hands. No survivors. The Anna C. Minch broke completely in half, something that almost never happens to ships that size. All 24 crew members were lost. The Novadoc ran aground, its crew battered by waves and wind. All but 2 of them drowned. 66 sailors died on Lake Michigan that day, their ships torn apart by the same storm that was killing duck hunters on the Mississippi. For the men stranded on the river islands, hope came the next morning in the form of an unlikely hero. Max Conrad was a pilot and flight school owner from Winona, Minnesota. On November 12th, with the wind still howling but the skies finally clearing, he took off in his tiny Piper Cub to search for survivors. Flying into headwinds that nearly kept his plane stationary, Conrad scanned the frozen riverbanks for any sign of life. When he spotted hunters, usually huddled behind their overturned boats, he would circle low, cut his engine, and shout out the window, "Hang on, help is coming." Then he would drop a waterproof container filled with sandwiches, whiskey, dry matches, and cigarettes. Dozens of men would later credit Max Conrad with saving their lives. He flew until well after dark, refusing to stop as long as there might be someone else out there, freezing, waiting, hoping. On the ground, rescue parties pushed out from every town along the river. Men with boats and ropes fought through the ice and snow to reach the stranded hunters. Some found the living. Many found the dead. In Winona, the city bus barn was converted into a temporary morgue. Bodies were brought in one by one, frozen solid, sometimes unidentifiable. Because many hunters were from out of town, identification had to wait until the bodies thawed and pockets could be searched for wallets and identification. The stories that emerged from the Armistice Day blizzard were almost too terrible to tell. One survivor reported watching a group of 17 men huddled together on an island, taking turns feeding a fire with driftwood all night. They made it. Another survivor saw a 16-year-old boy jumping up and down, hour after hour, in the freezing darkness. His older brother had told him to keep jumping before he died. The boy kept jumping until morning. His father and brother froze to death beside him. But he survived because he followed his brother's final instruction. Jack Meggers was 16 years old, hunting near Harpers Ferry, Iowa. He spent the night huddled with other hunters, watching men die around him, wondering if he'd be next. "That kid was 16, same as me," Meggers said decades later, remembering the boy who kept jumping. "I'll never forget what happened that day on the river." When the final count came in, the numbers were staggering. At least 154 people were dead, 49 in Minnesota alone, and nearly half of those were duck hunters. 66 sailors on Lake Michigan were among the dead. The rest were motorists, farmers, and others caught in the open when the storm hit. An estimated 85 duck hunters died across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. Their frozen bodies were recovered from marshes, lakes, potholes, ponds, and rivers across the heartland. Most had never had a chance. 1.5 million turkeys intended for Thanksgiving dinner froze to death across Minnesota and Iowa. Farmers were forced to sell them for 25 cents each, advertising them as fresh frozen. The apple industry in Iowa was devastated. Orchards that had taken decades to establish were killed by the ice. Many farmers never replanted, converting their land to corn and soybeans instead. The landscape of Iowa was permanently changed. And then came the question everyone was asking. How did no one see this coming? The answer was simple and damning. The National Weather Service had failed. In 1940, weather forecasting in the Midwest originated from a single office in Chicago. That office did not operate 24 hours a day. On Sundays, it was only staffed for half a day. On Saturday, November 9th, forecasters in Chicago looked at the storm system. They believed it would weaken and move east, away from the Midwest. They saw no cause for alarm. By Monday morning, when the truth became clear, it was already too late. Ships were at sea with no way to receive warnings. Hunters were out on the water with no idea what was coming. Motorists were driving to work in shirt sleeves. The Armistice Day blizzard changed everything. Within months, the National Weather Service mandated 24-hour, 7-day-a-week staffing at all major offices. New weather stations were established across the Midwest, including in Minneapolis, so forecasts no longer had to come from Chicago. The infrastructure we take for granted today, the constant weather updates, the storm warnings, the emergency alerts, all of it traces back to November 11, 1940. The men who died that day did not die for nothing. Their deaths forced changes that have saved countless lives since. But for the families left behind, that was cold comfort. Funerals were held across the Midwest for weeks. Wives became widows. Children lost fathers. Communities mourned neighbors they had known for decades. Survivors carried scars, visible and invisible, for the rest of their lives. Norman Roloff's friend, Gerald Terrace, the boy who survived because of the Labrador dogs, never fully recovered. He had watched his father, brother, and friend die beside him. The memory haunted him until his own death decades later. For those who lived through it, the Armistice Day blizzard became the defining event of their lives. 45 years after the storm, a Minnesota man named William Hull tracked down and interviewed more than 500 survivors. He published their stories in a book called All Hell Broke Loose. It is now in its 18th printing. The stories are filled with tragedy, yes, but also with incredible acts of heroism. Strangers helping strangers. Men risking their own lives to save others. Communities coming together in the worst possible circumstances. One thing stands out in every account. Nobody blamed the hunters for going out that day. The weather had been perfect. The forecasts had said nothing about what was coming. These were not reckless men. They were fathers, sons, brothers, friends, doing what they loved on a beautiful autumn morning. They just had no way of knowing. Today, if a storm like this were approaching, you would have days of warning. Your phone would alert you. The television would run constant updates. The National Weather Service would issue warnings and watches. Schools would close. Events would be canceled. People would prepare. In 1940, none of that existed. The Armistice Day blizzard was a different kind of disaster. Not just a tragedy of weather, but a tragedy of information. Of a nation that simply did not have the tools to warn its own people. The men who died on November 11, 1940, died because America was not ready. Their deaths ensured that America would be ready the next time. Every time you check your weather app, every time a storm warning flashes on your screen, every time forecasters correctly predict a blizzard days in advance, you are seeing the legacy of those 154 Americans who did not come home that day. The storm that brought down Galloping Gertie. The day the duck hunters died. The blizzard that caught a nation completely off guard. It was 84 years ago. But for the families who lost someone, for the survivors who never forgot, for the communities that came together to bury their dead and rebuild their lives, it might as well have been yesterday. If you have a story about the Armistice Day blizzard, if your father or grandfather survived that storm, or if you simply want to remember those who did not, please leave a comment below. Share this with someone who needs to know this history. And the next time you complain about the weather forecast being wrong, remember November 11th, 1940. Remember the price America paid to get it right. Hit subscribe to keep these stories alive. Until next time, hold your loved ones close. You never know when the weather might turn.